got a
Yeah.
bunch that's a little bit different.
Hey guys, I'm 55 years old, but I just met somebody today that I want to be like when I grow up. And I am being totally serious when I say everything that I heard from Stephen Pivnik today in my conversation with him is stuff that all of us can learn from. All of us should be inspired by. All of us should strive towards. So you get a chance to hear from a guy who has pushed himself in triathlons, who has pushed himself climbing the 7 summits, has pushed himself in business and in life. And he will share with you not only how he's done it, but how he's helping other people do it. So sit back and prepare to be in awe of my guest on this episode of Unbeatable. His name is Stephen Pivnik.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.
Hey, Stephen, thank you for joining me on this episode of Unbeatable.
Great to be here, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Man, I have been reading up on you. I am blown away by who you are and what you've accomplished. And I want the listeners to know a little bit about you. So I want to give kind of the highlights of your bio in one question. What does finishing the Ironman championship in Kona, climbing one of the world's 7 summits, and starting a business, what does all of that have in common?
Besides me, I would say that the one word is perseverance.
Okay. Yeah, I totally set you up for that one, by the way, for everybody who's listening right now. I was like, the obvious answer to this one is me, right?
No,
Man,
I appreciate the softball there.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Ironman just because of the human limit. When I watch people that are bonking on the run, when I see people that are barely making the transition from the swim to the bike, man, I'm just like, look at these people go. And not just the pace that they're going at, look at what they're giving of themselves to do a race like this. And I'm straight up enamored by mountain climbers because no one gets to a peak on one of the summits without going through some real rough stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to get into those 2 aspects of your background. But man, you have started businesses and they failed. You started more than one failed business. And most people would say, you know what, it's not for me. But the fact that you held on, hung in there, stayed with it, and now lead a very successful company. I'm a total fanboy right now.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, again, I think the term, perseverance applies here as well. I didn't let failure define me, and I tried again and didn't let it define me the second time. And third time's a charm. Third one was grown to over 200 employees before a successful exit to a $4 billion company. So hang in
Did
there.
you just say billion with a B?
Yeah, so one of our biggest competitors was a $4 billion software company called Quest Software, and
Yeah.
they acquired my business.
You basically, if they can't beat you, might as well buy you out, right?
That's almost exactly the way it went.
And no one in their right mind would argue with that logic when you're the guy who started the company and somebody, your big competitor worth 4 billion is saying, "Hey, you want to sell?"
Yeah.
I love your story, man, because we've had people on the show in the past that have started businesses and failed, but some of them did a hard right turn in their life. We've had a lot of people that have worked dead end 9-to-5 jobs and finally said, you know what, I don't want to live like this anymore. But the courage that it took to step away from the security blanket of a regular paycheck and start out on your own, that's no joke. We've had mountain climbers on this show. We've had pretty severe or serious athletes on this show, but I think you're the first guy that I've interviewed that is all 3 in one package. So I don't even know where to go with this thing, man. I'm not even sure where to start with this talk today.
And any of those 3 areas, I'm happy to address. I love sharing the story, just in the hopes of motivating others to pursue big goals.
Well, now you're talking our language because this whole podcast, even the name Unbeatable, is for people who have just been punched in the face by life, started a business, it failed, trying to climb that crevasse, and it's a lot more difficult, or I'm going to have to walk a lot longer than I want to. The headwinds in Kona and the heat were not what I was prepared for. And so that's why this podcast exists. And you got them all. I got them all in one package right here.
I love it. Shoot. Hit me with your
Yeah.
questions.
So I think let's start talking about business first, and then let's
Sure.
go to the summits, and let's go to, if I read the numbers correctly, 15 finishes at Ironman Kona. Is that right?
No, so it's actually numbered up to 17 now. It's
Oh yeah.
17
Okay.
full distance Ironman finishes and one Kona.
17 full up Ironmans. I've never done one. I've watched them all from a distance. I'm the guy on the bike and the swim that would, they would have the ambulance right behind me. Like, are
I hear
you
you.
going to be okay, ma'am? I can do the run, but the bike and the swim, it's a whole nother animal.
Well,
All
anybody that's
right.
listening that wants to attempt one of these, I highly, highly encourage them to try a shorter one first.
Yeah. Do the small sprint triathlons
Yes,
before you get into the big boys, right?
100%. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me. Whenever the race director asks during a race briefing who here is doing their first triathlon, there's always at least one person who's this is their first triathlon. And I'm like, I raced for
And
two
then,
years before I attempted an
yeah,
Ironman.
I was going to say, and then everybody else in the room looks at that one person with their hand up and they're like, oh man, you don't even know what you're about to get into, right? Um, Maybe the best way to get this conversation rolling is to talk about your upbringing. I did a little bit of research. Your family came to the United States from Eastern Europe, and obviously, mom and dad put something in your DNA that made you keep going and not give up, gave you some resilience. But talk a little bit about your childhood. Can you tell us where you came
Yeah,
from and
sure.
talk a
I
little
mean,
bit about your
I
childhood?
was born in the former Soviet Union, what is now Ukraine, in a poor town called Odessa. It's really
Oh,
unfortunate.
you're from, for real? You're from Odessa, Ukraine.
I was born in Odessa, Ukraine.
Wow.
Yep. So my parents immigrated here when I was two, and I just learned the grind, by watching the grind. I mean, between my father and my grandfather, I never witnessed a single sick day. There was no such thing as, not going to work for the day. They went above and beyond to put, food on the table, a roof over our heads, and just to provide for the family. So I definitely learned, perseverance and stamina and a, go-getter type attitude from them.
Okay, hold on. I'm doing some history in my head right now. What year did your family immigrate from
We
Ukraine?
came in 1972. I was three.
Okay. This is almost the apex, if not pretty close to the apex of the Cold War.
Yeah.
How on earth does your family leave the former United Soviet Socialist Republic and the country of Ukraine? How do they get to the US in the first
It was
place
really,
in
really
the
hard.
in the middle of the Cold War? How did that
It
happen?
was really hard. Like, it was at the, like you said, towards the end of the Cold War, but the beginning of a mass exodus from the former Soviet Union. And there was an organization in the United States called NYANA, New York Association for New York. Anyway, it's called NYANA. I forget what it stands for. It's in the book. And they helped. So they got us out of Odessa into Austria for a couple of days, and then through Austria into Italy, where we were stateless. There's actually a documentary called Stateless because we had to give up our Soviet passports and citizenship in order to leave, and then we didn't have a place to go to yet. So Rome, Italy was the staging area, if you will, for a bunch of immigrants trying to get into the United States. And we lived in Rome for 6 months awaiting our paperwork.
All right, mom and dad were stateless. I think I recognize the issue that could become like if it. All right, let's just do this for the listeners out there who have ever seen the movie The Terminal with Tom Hanks, who's stuck in an airport literally because nobody will let him leave, nobody will let him get back on an airplane. You don't have a country anymore. There's no one who wants to claim you. Anybody who's been stateless is essentially in the Tom Hanks, the terminal state. How did mom and dad navigate that kind of challenge with a 2 year old baby? Is that how old you were
Yeah, it was
when
tough.
they?
Yeah, I was exactly two. My father's
Holy
working
smokes!
my father's working odd jobs because, he had to, while learning English at the same time because he knew that we were going to the States eventually and he was going
Hold
to,
on. Uh, he's a Russian speaker
yes.
in Rome in an Italian speaking country trying to learn English so that he can get to the United States. Your dad and mother are amazing,
while
dude.
repairing air conditioners and automobiles to make a little bit of loose
Yeah.
change.
Um, I didn't even know that you were from Ukraine. So obviously you got some thoughts and you got some sentimental attachment to what's happening right now. I don't want this interview to be about this for 30 seconds or a minute. Can you give people your thoughts on what the people of Ukraine are going through, what's happening in your former country right now?
No, I mean it's horrific. I mean there's I don't even think I have the right vocabulary to explain because I see all these things on TV and I actually fortunately we don't have any more family there. All of our family has come over to the US. But I have plenty of friends that do have family and
Yeah.
I was literally
Yeah.
getting the play-by-play on FaceTime from their phones of them actually sitting there and watching
Oh
missiles
my goodness,
flying.
man.
And I mean, I just got chills just describing the
Yeah.
story. But back
Yeah.
when it was actually happening, it still is gut wrenching, but it's just horrible.
Yeah, I'm watching news reports coming out of Ukraine. I'm very, very interested in what's happening in Ukraine. I also watch what's happening right now in Gaza. And by the way, we're recording this in early June 2024. So right now, these two hot spots are very serious. But for me, I'm a lot more focused on what's happening in Ukraine because the potential for this to spread across the Eastern Europe, where Gaza seems very much contained right now to one small part. Ukraine could be the first domino, and so man, I'm watching what's happening in Ukraine, and I'm watching very carefully the international coverage of what Russia is doing to the Ukrainian people. And man, it's it's terrible. We're going to get off this subject because if not, I'm going to spend the rest of this interview on that. I don't want to talk about Ukraine for the whole interview, but for everybody listening, if you haven't been paying attention, you need to care about what's happening in Ukraine because this very well could be 1945 all over again, and just one state after another. Could be Georgia, could be Chechnya, it could be one of the Caucasus next. So you should care about what's happening in Ukraine right now because this we could be watching history repeat itself.
Absolutely. And there's a great documentary called Turning Point on Netflix right now, which really does a great job of educating everybody on what the Cold War really was, what it turned
Yeah.
into, and the version of it now.
I'm trying not to be paranoid, but I am a avid student of history, military history especially. So just trying to let the listeners know, like, you need to care what's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah,
You should care what's happening in Gaza too, but you really need to care
agreed.
about what's happening in Ukraine. All right, mom and dad come to the United States. Are you the only child? Do you have siblings?
So I like to refer to her as made in Italy. So my sister Angela was made in Italy
Made in
and
Italy. I
born
love it.
and born in New York City.
Okay, nice. So she's obviously 2, 3 years younger than you.
She's yeah, exactly.
Okay. And by the time mom and dad get to New York City, now they've got a toddler, an infant, and basically the clothes on their back. Am I getting this right?
Pretty much. I mean, they did allow us to pack up a whole bunch of our belongings and ship it over here, but
Uh-huh.
that delivery took a good 6 months after we arrived into US to arrive. So we basically relied on charity. Again, this organization that helped us out, they provided an apartment for us. I think they prepaid the rent for a few months until we were able to pay for it by ourselves. And so yeah, the organization was a great help. We knew like one or two other families that were already here, which is why we chose New York because we had options. We could go to Cleveland. We had Australia as an option. We had Israel as an option. There was a lot of options, but we
Plus the Statue of Liberty, right? I mean, like, I'm serious. Hundreds of millions of people have passed through there and said, that right there is my ticket to freedom. And when I say freedom, I mean, I don't have to live in the conditions that my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents have gone through. Maybe I can have a better future for my children. And the fact that your family was willing to leave everything behind and to come to a new country with just a few items that they packed up, man, and the charity that supported you guys and provided a place to live and, a little bit of help just until you got on your feet is incredible. So obviously you watched mom and dad basically start life all over again. So this is where we transition now to some of those lessons that you learned watching mom and dad that helped you go from being a computer programmer to starting a business and then scaling cliffs or scaling mountains and finishing Ironmans. Talk about some of those lessons, and if you can, give us some where those lessons come from. Like, tell us specific examples of some of the lessons that you learned
Yeah, I
growing
mean,
up,
I think
watching mom and dad.
I think the biggest one is the work ethic, right? I mean, I witnessed that work ethic, all day, every day. My father woke up early, drove my sister and I to school, and then we came home by bus, and he came home around 7, 8 o'clock at night, day in and day out, including Saturdays. So
And like you said, never got sick. And even if he was sick, nobody ever knew it, right?
no,
Because
I
he's got
I
to
remember him coming
feed the
home.
family.
I remember him leaving the house or coming home, coughing up a lung, but it didn't matter. He was going to work. And,
Yeah.
same with my grandfather. We lived together for a while, and I witnessed this from both of them. So the work ethic was a huge lesson, and then just family, right? Getting the family together, going out as a family. There was once more and more people started coming over, and my parents started making friends here. There was just an incredible amount of camaraderie and laughter. I mean, I make a big point out of sharing how important it is to laugh whenever I speak to anybody, because it's medically proven to add years to your life. So I am a huge fan of just having a great time with friends and family, and celebrate Tuesday, celebrate Wednesday, celebrate Thursday, celebrate whatever there
Yeah.
is to
Yeah.
celebrate.
I'm writing this down. We used to have a phrase that we would toss around when it got really, really bad in the military. We would tell each other to embrace the suck,
Embrace the
and we
sun.
would find a way to just laugh in the middle of some incredible hardships. And when one guy can find some light levity or some
Yep.
levity in the middle of it, everybody starts to feel a little bit better. It didn't get any easier, but now everybody feels a little bit better as you're going through
I,
the
I, I
hard
love that
times.
term. I read a lot of books about Rangers and SEALs, and embrace the suck comes up often.
Yeah. You learn to laugh, you learn a work ethic. Can you tell us a little bit about mom? Because obviously she had to figure out how to start a family and build a home for you guys all over again.
Yeah, I mean, at first, I mean, she was a stay-at-home mom. I mean, her job was to take care of us, right? My father was working all the time, so the second we got home from school, there was food on the table. There was her job was to make sure we got our homework done, and if we needed help, how we can get the help that we needed. And so yeah, she was basically the cement that held the family together, and just the love and care that she showed for us was um, contagious.
Yeah. I think you and I are probably pretty close in age. So when you finished high school, you ended up as a mainframe programmer. Did you go to school for this, or did you step right into this world straight out of high school?
Yeah, so my parents gave me an incredible pass to not go to college. I went to college for about 3 days.
And realize those 3 days it's
I'm
not
like,
for you,
I
right?
really don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Sure.
So my mother found out about this computer programming course being offered in downtown Manhattan, and they were teaching COBOL at the time because that was the programming language for mainframes. There were no PCs back in 1988.
That's why I said you and I are about the
Yeah,
same age. So I remember a world where nobody had a computer at their home. Literally, it
right.
was not feasible. No human being could afford,
Sure.
let alone would your house be able to contain a computer.
Right, a
So
100%. So mainframes were the thing, and I took it was a 9-month programming course which guaranteed job placement. It took me 6 months. They got me my first interview, and to this day, I'm blown away. This is how big of a need there was for computer programmers. I was 19 years old and landed a job at a big publishing company at the time called Reader's Digest, making 19.
Oh, for real?
Yeah,
Reader's Digest, man.
you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it. For the audience that doesn't know this, man, that thing had a circulation of like 50 million people, and it was summarization of the popular books that were on the shelf. But man, Reader's Digest was everywhere
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
the
I mean, the
80s.
the numbers are hard to comprehend. 50 million circulation in print circulation. There was
Yeah.
no internet.
When he says 50 million, that's not an exaggeration. A book that sells 50,000 today is phenomenally successful. And Reader's Digest was putting out 50 million copies, if I remember right, a month, is what they were putting out. And I picked up more than a few copies of Reader's Digest and thumbed through them and,
Yep.
skimmed a book in a matter of 20, 50 pages.
I'm really upset because I had a huge collection because I worked there, obviously, right? So I got one every month, and I had a huge collection at home, and we moved several times, so it got lost.
Yeah.
But that would have been a great
Oh man, could you imagine what
collector's
that
item right
collection would
there.
be worth on eBay right now?
Exactly.
I know what a mainframe is. All of the folks that have never seen a payphone have no idea, what the early computers looked like. They
Yeah,
don't even know the phrase mainframe.
exactly.
Can you tell them what what a mainframe computer was when you started in the business back doing programming COBOL?
Mainframe, if you can imagine something the size of a container truck in the basement of a building,
Basically, the size of a semi truck in a
some of a
computer
semi
or
truck, yep, in the
in a
basement of a
huge
building.
office building basement.
Yep, that's doing all the data processing that a company, needed back then, updating customer records, so when you have bills, updating profiles, you're doing, tax calculations, payroll calculations, things like that. And at the end of the day, for those of you that are on video, it had less power than this phone does right now. I'm holding it
People are
up an
scratching their
iPhone.
heads right now. He's absolutely right. This computer, the size of a semi truck trailer, couldn't even do a fraction of what the cell phone in your pocket can do. And they needed some really, really smart guys like Stephen to be able to get this thing to work. Um, if you've ever seen the movie Hidden Figures, there's a very prominent scene where they're putting a mainframe computer in NASA, and some of the ladies are trying to figure out how to program it, because they realize when this thing starts working, we're going to be out of a job. But I remember the scene where they have to bust the doorway open because the doorway is too small to get the computer in there. That computer is so freakishly large that we're going to have to do major construction on the building just to get the computer inside the building.
And I think
One computer.
if I recall correctly, they called it the IBM. The IBM is coming.
The IBM.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
as in singular,
Yes,
international business machine computer that's the size of a semi truck trailer.
exactly.
How long did you do this before you decided, you know what, this ain't for me? I don't want to spend the rest of my life at a terminal. I think I want to go start out on my own and give my
Yes,
own
so
thing
I,
a
I
try.
did it for several years. So I moved around primarily just because I got bored and I wanted to work in different environments on different types of programs. At Reader's Digest, it was billing. Then at a company called Sealand, it was freight logistics. Um,
Sealand, the huge shipping
the
container
huge container
company.
company
Really?
that was acquired by Maersk after,
Wow.
after a while.
Yeah.
So that was fascinating working on like international shipping logistics. That was
Uh
great. Merrill Lynch for a little bit, working on finance
huh.
applications.
He's listed all of the big boys right now.
Yeah,
Keep going. I love it.
because these are the companies that can afford mainframes, right? It was
Yeah.
you couldn't get those are
Right.
the only computers you can get, so you have to be a massive corporation. And then the PC age, came around in the mid 90s, and with the help of a friend, I started learning some PC programming skills, and I picked that up pretty quickly, and decided to branch out on my own and offer PC programming skills to whichever customer possibly wanted it.
I want to remind the listeners right now, he's talking about a time where there were a few really small startups like Apple, like Microsoft, like Google that were trying to get into this personal computer business because all people knew was computers the size of semi truck trailers.
Right.
And now there's going to be a computer in every home. How do we get in on some of that action?
Exactly. And with I mean, the computer in and of itself, doesn't solve business challenges. You need programming expertise, which I had to, there was no such thing as an app store. Like today, a company needs a payroll system. They go and they subscribe to a payroll system. They need a sales system. They go and subscribe to Salesforce.com or a myriad of their competitors. Back in the day, if a company needed to automate a business process, they needed to write this application from
Yeah, they
scratch.
needed you to build it,
Right.
the software for them.
Exactly. And that's what we did.
All right. We've had several people on this show that have kind of stepped away from their life's career and had a second start in life. I'll never forget a couple of them who decided, you know what, I don't want to be a very successful businesswoman. I want to be a chef, and like a radical change in life and become extraordinarily successful. But in every case, there's the same story. Like, it's the moment that you're starting to think about everything that I know and all of my security is tied up in what I've done in the past, programming mainframes and personal computers. And now I'm thinking about stepping out into my own. And this is one of those moments that separates the grown-ups from the children, right? Because every child wants a pacifier in their mouth and a security
Of
blanket on
course.
their back. And that's what a regular paycheck does for you.
Right.
So, can you talk about how terrifying, this is my word, not yours, stepping away from everything that you know and deciding, I want to start a business is?
It really was risky. I mean, I did have a couple of, fallback plans. So there was a little bit of an
I
insurance
like that.
policy, but not
I
any, it
like
wasn't a
it.
humongous parachute, but there was a little bit of an insurance policy. Primarily, I was banking on myself, right? I said, I can be successful, and God forbid I'm not. I can probably, not probably, I was very confident that I can go back and get the job. Maybe not at the same company, maybe at another company,
Yeah.
doing whatever I was doing. It wasn't guaranteed, but I felt very confident that if things didn't go well, I can do that.
Okay. One failed business attempt is soul crushing. A second failed business attempt will usually take any dreams of the future out of a person. How did you bounce back after that first one? How did you bounce back after the second one? Because most people are like, okay, it's time to go back to what I know. I hate it, but it's time to go back to it.
Yeah, I mean, I continue to do a pretty good job of just I call it a postmortem, just analyzing a failure to see why it occurred, and to try to do things differently second time around. Like if I don't succeed in a specific distance type of race, and this has happened to be in ultra marathons. Like I think my first attempt at a 100 mile failed miserably. So I'm sorry, at a 100K. I fell short at 38 miles, and I knew exactly why that happened. So when I tried the 100K the second time around, I knew not to repeat what I did wrong
Yeah,
when I
don't do
only
that
made it
again
for
because that
30 minutes.
hurts. Let's don't do that a second time.
Exactly. And same in the business world. Like, why didn't you market better? Why didn't you position yourself differently? Why didn't you differentiate yourself? Why didn't you hire this type of individual? So by the third time around, I nailed it, and we hit it out of the park.
So you did get an advanced degree from the School of Hard Knocks, is what you're telling me.
I love that. I haven't used that term ever, but from now on I will. I have a
Yeah,
PhD from the School of Hard Knocks.
you have a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks. Yeah, the last couple of guests that have been on the show have talked about failure and how failure really helped them in the future. They hated it at the time, but even used this language, failing forward, meaning I learned some things, and if I hadn't failed, there's no way I would have been able to pull off what I'm doing now. And it sounds like that's kind of what happened to you in business. And I'm talking to that guy out there who's working a dead end job. I'm talking to that woman out there who's in a career that she hates and she's not sure if she wants to risk it. And Stephen is saying, look, it is a risk and you actually might even fail, but it's okay as long as you learn. If I'm hearing you right, the ultimate tragedy would be to fail and not learn anything from that and
100%.
then
I mean,
repeat it over again,
that's
right?
almost, you probably read. That's one of my chapters in my book is called DNF, did not finish, And in it, I talk about failure and how failure shouldn't define you. And
I
as long as you're learning and moving forward, there's absolutely nothing wrong. Like
I've had
did not finish does not mean failed. Just
I've had DNF next to my name on in an event a couple of years ago, and I am proud to say I learned a whole lot from that. Um, okay, so from business to let's talk mountains next before we get into triathlons after that. You did a couple of ultras. It sounds like you tried 100K, which I'll do the math for those of you out there who are on the imperial system. That's 62.1 miles. And at the 38-mile mark, a little bit more than halfway, things went south for you. The rational person says, okay, that hurt. That hurt really bad. I don't want to go through that again. But obviously, Steven's not rational. So he says, I'm going to figure out how to do this and make it all the way to the end,
right.
all the way to mile marker 61.2 instead of DNF. What happened at while you were scaling some of those mountains, man?
Oh, so I've had a couple of DNFs on mountains as well. I mean, I fell in love
Okay.
with mountaineering. So we used to do a lot of work with Microsoft. Microsoft is on the West Coast near Seattle. Um,
Yeah, Mount Rainier. I know it
yeah,
well because I used to live out that way.
I love Matt Rainier. One business trip out there, I had a meeting on a Friday and on a Monday, so it made no sense to fly back to the East Coast just to return. So I asked around on what the best way to kill some time was, and Matt Rainier was recommended to me. So I went out there and I just fell in love with the mountain. Immediately signed up for a mountaineering course to, learn some mountaineering
Yeah,
skills
you gotta learn some skills.
and to
Yep.
scale, not Rainier. So you can do all that in 4 days. 2 days of training, 2 days of climbing, weather permitting. You're at the top of Mount Rainier, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And that experience gets you really, really prepared for what real alpine climbing is going to be like because the conditions are really, really tough up there. Between the cold and the wind and the
Oh yeah.
crevasses and the ice,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's brutal. If you like it, then you probably want to go further. And my
You're gonna
further
get
was
hooked, right?
I totally got hooked. So the next one was I think Denali in Alaska.
Oh yeah, the tallest mountain in North America for people
Correct.
who are not living in these parts.
22,000 feet high.
Uh-huh.
That trip we only made it to 14,000, and then we could not attempt the summit because of really bad weather. So, and I only go with reputable climbing companies because they will not let you proceed in unsafe conditions. So when the lead guy goes, hey, we're out of food, we're going home. Guess what? We went home. So that was a DNF. Kilimanjaro was next. Got that done. That was 19,000 feet in Africa. After Kilimanjaro, it was Aconcagua in South America, which is 23,000 feet, right outside Mendoza. That was, straight to the top. No issues. Well, no, it was a rough experience because only three. I think we started with 17 members and only three made it to the top. Everybody's fine. No, thank God, no real injuries. No deaths, but everybody, three of us made it to the top. Um, Tried Denali again, DNF again.
Oh
And
no.
long story short, I'll get to the punchline. In exactly 11 months from today, I'm going to Everest.
Nice. This is the one, right? Number
That's the
3 is
one.
going to be it. I had a buddy who tried to summit Everest twice. Both times ran into significant issues, never got a chance to summit Everest. He's trying to do it a third time, but he's older now and may never get a chance.
Ugh, that sounds
I've
unfortunate.
also had a friend, and I just want to make this. I want the listeners to understand the how intense this is. I have a friend that just about a year ago was at the peak physical shape. He and I are about the same age. He's extremely fit, been active his whole life. Was in the military with me. Very successful guy, and he was climbing Kilimanjaro for a fundraiser and got acute mountain sickness, ended up having an embolism up there. They did their best to get him off the mountain. He didn't make it. And Kilimanjaro is tough, but compared to some of the mountains that Steven is listing right now, Kilimanjaro is not nearly as tough as some of those mountains. And a buddy of mine in peak physical shape doesn't make it, back down. He actually makes it back down Kilimanjaro, and I think he passes away as soon as they get him to the hospital. But I want people to know, like, this is no joke what you're describing, and the people that have been able to pull this one off, I got mad respect for. Um, I got a little bit hooked by the mountains myself. This was early on in the military, but the U.S. Army sent me and my family out to the West Coast, and we were living in Olympia, Washington. And I had a house that I didn't know it at the time when we bought the house, because we moved in October. And then about 6 months later, literally 6 months later, the skies cleared for the first time in the entire time that we've been in the country. And there is Mount Rainier right in front of our face, and it is bigger than life. And yes, and we're in the, Pacific Northwest, which is 300 days of rain a year. And when that got, old, we used to say to the family, all right, everybody, get in the car, we're getting the truck, we're going up to Mount Rainier, we're going to get above the snow line, and we're going to go play in the snow, because I'm done being rained on for right now. We're going to go play in the snow on Mount Rainier. And it was our way of just taking a break from the rain to be able to get in the snow. But man, it gets treacherous on Rainier.
It does. It
Um,
definitely does. So I highly recommend it, but also just beware. This is
yeah, be
it's
careful,
not a
right?
walk in the park. Go
You
and
got to know
experience
your
Grove
stuff
Country.
on any mountain. You got to
Yeah.
know your stuff. But I can see how a guy like you could get hooked.
Yeah.
Um, go from mountaineering. Let's talk about triathlons, Ironman distance triathlons, because that is no joke. What got you into triathlons in the first place? About what time frame did this start for you,
Sure.
and why did you say, I want to try Ironman distance
I know
triathlons?
exactly when it happened. So around the time I was turning 40, I call it my midlife crisis.
Okay,
My
I like that.
family's genes started weighing really heavily on me. Between my grandparents and my parents, they had it all. High blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, strokes, you name it, they had it. When I was turning 40, I'm like, you know what? All of that stuff is hereditary, so it's in here somewhere. So if and when it rears its ugly head, I don't want to go through the pain that I witnessed them going through. So I want to get as healthy as possible. Not that I was unhealthy. My wife hates it when I call myself a couch potato, but I wasn't physically active. I was a skier. I was an avid skier. That's about it. So coincidentally, I go to a dinner party at work, and somebody said that one of our employees just finished a sprint triathlon. And I'm like, a triathlon? I thought this was an elite event only held in the Olympics by these chiseled athletes.
Yeah.
So I met with
And
her.
you were like, look at that person. If that person can do it, maybe some
I,
couch potato like me,
I
right?
just needed to, I was incredibly intrigued. So I just needed to learn more. So I called her into my office. I think I scared a lot. I scared her because I called her into my office out of the blue. She's like, why is Steven calling me into his office?
Yeah.
Why does the CEO of the company want to talk to me? I'm like, tell me about this triathlon thing. How does a mere mortal do a triathlon?
I love your language. I'm writing this down. A mere mortal.
So she goes, oh, it's really easy. You go to this website. It's called beginnertriathlete.com. I think it's still around. If not that, then there's active.com, which is definitely around.
Active.com. Definitely.
Yep. You,
Yep.
you type in your location, you type in the type of race you're
Sure.
looking for, a whole list of races comes up. Boom. So I signed up for a sprint. For the next 3 months, I trained. I finished my first triathlon, which was a sprint distance triathlon. And then that night, I emailed my employee and I thanking her for the recommendation, for the motivation. And she goes, oh, you're very welcome. I knew you can do it. We'll see you in Kona one day. I had no idea what that meant. So, of course, I Googled Kona triathlon. And then all of these Ironman videos come up, and the Ironman, the World Championship videos come out. And that struggle that you referred to when we first started speaking about these people bonking 20 feet from the finish line and crawling and just touching it with their finger to say that they finished. I don't, I, just everything about it spoke to me. And I said, I don't know how, I don't know when, somehow, some way, I'm getting to Kona. And
You and I are kindred spirits, Stephen. It's videos like that that makes me say, I love that. I want
yes,
to see if I've got that in me too.
100%. And
Lots of people don't know triathlon, so I want you to back up for just a
sure,
second. What is a sprint distance triathlon? And then tell everybody about a full triathlon. Describe distances. I
sure.
know what it is, but just educate
No, of
the
course.
listeners a
Thank you
little
for
bit.
reminding me because I mean, this is my third language, so I assume just everybody speaks it too.
Oh, by the way, he also speaks three languages, very successful in business, can climb mountains, can do Ironmans, and he speaks more than one language. I struggle with the English language.
Thank you. Okay, so a sprint distance is an 800-meter swim, which is the equivalent of 32 times back and forth in the pool, 12 miles on the bike, and a 5K, basically a 3.1 mile run.
Hmm.
All very, very doable in usually around 2 to 3 hours. So for me, the swimming was the hardest part, even though I was very comfortable in the water. I just didn't have any form, any perseverance, any sort of style. So I figured that one out. So I got that done.
Style. I like your word there. Style in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I see somebody with style in the water, it's really, really impressive because
Yeah.
I have a ton of perseverance now, but I still don't have the right style. Working or always work in progress. So that's a sprint. An Ironman or a full distance triathlon.
Yeah.
Ironman just
Wait a second. I want to prepare everybody for this, Mom. If you're in the minivan and the kids are in the background, you got to turn this up right now because sprint distance is 800-meter swim, 12-mile bike, and a 5K run. Now tell everybody Ironman distances.
so an Ironman distance is a 2.4 mile swim, a 112-mile bike, and a full marathon 26.2 mile run.
Back to back to back. And by the way, in the Kona championships, that swim is open water in the Pacific, fighting the waves and the currents and everything else like that.
If
And and
the
and at
majority
the
of the
end of the
venues have these in open water environments or either
yeah,
in a lake, a river, or the open ocean.
and at the end of the day, I know the distances, but tell everybody how many miles you're putting on your body total in a Ironman distance triathlon.
So for everybody listening or watching, if you ever see a bumper sticker with a that says 140.6, honk at that person because they completed an Ironman. So total, it's
140.6 miles.
140.6 for the day.
Miles. Yeah. And Kona is notoriously challenging for the reasons that I just mentioned. It's the winds out there, it's the brutal heat out there. I mean, most people don't realize just how miserable Hawaii can get, but
Yeah,
the Kona is notorious for
the
it.
distance is brutal in and of itself on a fine day, but when you're racing in 90-degree heat, 90% humidity, and heat coming off the lava fields off of the
Yeah,
Queen K
yeah.
Highway for 112 miles, you're basically racing in a frying pan.
In a frying pan. Yeah, I love it.
So,
Stephen, you've been around the world. You've done some pretty impressive things. Let's talk about where you are right now. So you took a company on try number three, learned a few things on the first two failures, put them all into place, and was very successful. Can you describe really quickly building that company from scratch to more than 200 employees before you sold it to your competitors?
sure. So it was a software company. We built software. It was a very, very niche. Our software helped large companies convert email data. The simplest use case I can share is as the cloud was becoming more and more popular, let's say all these companies had their email servers in their basement, running internally. All this data now needed to be moved to the cloud. That doesn't happen. Another one of my favorite words. It doesn't happen automatically. It happens
Automagically.
even though you
I
may have
love it.
Microsoft servers in your basement and you're going to the Microsoft cloud. There was a need for all of this data conversion to occur. So our software and services help move large volumes of data for millions of end users around the world over the years. So that's what we specialized in.
And how long did you run this company? You were the founder CEO before you sold it. How long did it go? What's the length
So
of distance
it was a
from
very long
start to
time.
sold?
We went for 26 years.
26
It was
years.
a long time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
we were founded when email just started becoming a thing in the
Uh-huh.
corporate world, and there was a whole bunch of movement of email data. There was a variety of use cases. There was competition between IBM, Microsoft, Google. There was other smaller players that are around. There was mergers, acquisitions that required data movement. but the advent of the cloud required a ton of data movement. So we just, kept up with the times, and whatever the use cases presented themselves, those are the ones that we serviced really, really well. And obviously better than our competition because they acquired the company.
Yeah. Well, for all of the listeners out there that are like, Steven's the reason why my emails, why I start getting these specialized advertising emails, because somebody's figured out how to mine all of that data from my emails, right? Like it was there all along, but the companies didn't know how to get access to it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I will not take any responsibility for
Of
spam.
course, you're not the guy who actually
No,
did
I
it,
did
but
not
you
invent
developed the
spam,
software.
but
Right.
we did create the biggest moving truck in the world to move email data from one place to another.
When did you sell?
It
How
was
long ago was this?
September 21, so
Really?
just over three
In
years
the
ago,
heart of
in
COVID.
the heart of COVID.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
I like to say that our business was almost recession proof and and obvious and disease proof, because email is mission critical to every single
Yeah.
company, right? And the
Of course.
companies, it's the number one mission critical system, right?
What business and what industry in the world doesn't rely heavily on email? They may
Exactly.
have 50 other ways that they do business, but email is always at the top.
Right. So even like during the recession, during a pandemic, email is email. Email, like you can definitely argue, and rightfully so, that email became even more important during the pandemic
Yeah.
because now
Of
everybody's
course.
working remotely, and your email system better be top notch or as up to date and as modern as possible. And we made that happen.
Yeah. What after selling the company, what did you do next? What are you doing now?
So shortly after selling the company, I finished Kona. So I was my 12-year journey to get to Kona. Uh, I finally
You
got
had
the
a little bit of free time on your hands.
I,
I'm going to Kona.
I,
I'm going to conquer this
I
course.
got the Kona, conquered that course, and then I decided to write a book to memorialize my story in the hopes of motivating others to dream big and to go after big goals. Because if a college dropout couch potato can build and sell a company and do Kona, you can finally put your big goal into action and get it done. So I wrote the book primarily to memorialize my story, motivate others, but also to add credibility to myself so that I can take it on the road. I love sharing the story from a stage, and I think the book just provides credibility to get onto those stages.
I'm going to go there next, but I wanted to tee you up. That was my little segue to give you the chance to talk about the book now. I'm a big fan of letting the guests talk about their book. In fact, I typically give away a copy of the book, and we're going to give away a copy of your
Awesome.
book to somebody who's watching or listening to this episode. But tell everybody about the book. When did it come out? Where can they find it?
Sure. So the book is titled Built to Finish.
There it is. If you're watching it on YouTube, Built to Finish.
Built to Finish: How to Go the Distance in Business and in Life. It's available on Amazon. It hit number one when it was released. I think it
Look
was,
at you,
yeah,
man. Number one on Amazon.
it stayed number one for a little while, which exceeded my expectations. I was gonna be happy with top 10, but I got number one, which was awesome. So it's
Yeah.
available on Amazon. The audiobook is coming out in July. For anybody that actually knows about the Ironman world, it was recorded by Mike Riley, who is known worldwide as the voice of Ironman. So the audiobook will be available soon in
He
July.
read your book for you.
He read my book
He
for me.
did?
It's amazing. I
Wow.
mean, for
Yeah,
those of
that's
you,
cool.
there's a very, very famous announcer in the Ironman world that calls people across the finish line, and he coined the phrase instead of just saying, "Hey, congratulations, Stephen, you finished the race," or "Congratulations, Jeff, you're done." He actually coined the phrase as you cross the finish line, "Stephen Pivnik, you are an Ironman. Jane
Yeah.
Smith, you are an Ironman," and the crowd goes crazy for every
Yeah.
single finisher
That
with those
is
words.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's even more cool that he would be willing to record the audio version of your book for you.
Yeah, it's
Um,
amazing. I mean, one of my favorite sayings, which I stole from one of my CFOs, was, "Don't ask, don't get." So, what's the worst that somebody can say? No.
don't ask, don't get.
Yeah,
Or I think I read somewhere where somebody really wise said, "You have not because you ask not.
I
Don't
love, I
ask,
love that.
don't get." Um, so you speak to audiences now, And you're a guy who can obviously talk about perseverance. You're a guy who can talk about bouncing back. You know, resilience in and out. But listen, man, nobody gets to the top of some of the seven summits. Nobody makes it across the finish line at Kona in the Ironman championships. Nobody sells a business, like you do without figuring out how to push themselves to the limits. So, with the last few minutes of this interview today, can you just describe a little bit about how you challenge audiences to push themselves? Because part of being unbeatable is getting punched in the face by life, and everything inside of you wants to lay down on the mat, stay there, and not get up. But something has to call you to say, I got to push myself. I got to get back up and get back in there, because if not, I'm going to stay down forever. So this is a great way for you to just talk to everybody who's listening to this episode. Talk about pushing themselves for a
Yeah,
few minutes,
I
will you?
mean, in addition to just having that, inner fire that's burning, that wants more than anything to succeed, my biggest piece of advice would be to surround yourselves with folks that have been there and done that. Now, everything that you just mentioned, Jeff, I could not have
Great
accomplished
advice.
if I
Great
didn't have
advice.
the right advisor around me. For the last few years in the business world, I had fantastic advisors. I had great coaches in my triathlon journey. I go with the most reputable climbing companies when I hit these mountains. So I'm rarely there by myself, even though an Ironman is a very, very individual, a triathlon is a very individual race. But getting you to that start line requires a village, right? And then cheering you on. Sometimes it's helpful to have a village that's cheering you on to get you, knowing that you know what, I need to get to that finish line because my family is waiting there, or my coach is waiting there for me. And same with a mountain. So yeah, an inner fire is a humongous requirement, but what's going to make or break success is who you surround yourself with.
I'm writing both of these down, man. This is priceless advice right now. Nobody can do the inner fire for you, right? Like either you have it or
Sure.
you don't have it, and you are going to face the lava fields in Kona, and it's going to be the inner fire that keeps you churning away or keeps you cranking on those pedals. If you don't have the inner fire, no coach can give that to you. But I've watched some of the most talented people on the planet, smartest people, some of the strongest people, some of the fastest people who should have been able to blow the whole field of competitors away, and they fall flat on their face. And it's because they didn't have the second half of what you're describing. They didn't have the advisors. There's some people listening right now that are saying, well, I would love to try climbing a mountain. I'd love to try a sprint triathlon. I'd love to step away and start into business, but I don't even know where to find the people that could give me advice. And Stephen is a guy who's been surrounded by people who have been there and figured out how to do it, and he's learned from them. Stephen, how do those people find an advisor to step into a world that they've never been in
I
before?
think people would be pleasantly surprised with how many others want to help. Obviously, there's a ton of paid advisors out there. I mean, that's what I'm currently doing. I'm
There's a
actually
whole lot of
helping.
people making a lot of money
Yeah.
doing that, right?
Anybody.
Business and executive coaches making insane amounts of money
Right.
doing that.
Exactly. So I'm really enjoying, doing that. But at the same time, I get phone calls left, right, and center, and I rarely turn down a conversation, even if I know from the get-go that I won't be able to help you because it's not my area of expertise. There's still you'll walk away with something valuable from a conversation. And there's so many other people in my boat, people that have succeeded want to pay it forward. Not everybody, but I think the vast majority want to pay it forward and help out a fellow human.
Okay, that is something that all of us can do. Let's say that you're listening to this episode, you're being inspired by Stephen, and you're starting to realize, you know what, I've been okay at this thing, or I've been kind of successful at something in my past. Maybe it's time for you, listener, to pay it forward to somebody else who would love to follow in your footsteps, but they don't even know where to start. And by the way, when you start paying it forward, or when you start stepping into another arena, you'll find a couple of people who would love to help you along the way, give you some advice, and maybe even they feel good about watching you succeed. There are people out there like that, believe it or not.
No, totally. And there's so many groups out there. Like in the category of triathlons, one that I'm part of, and I participate, I answer questions all the time. Triathlon for Beginners is what it's called. It's out on Facebook, and
Uh-huh.
there's a fill in the blank for beginners for everything.
Just about. Yep.
Business startups for beginners, mountain
Right.
climbing for beginners. It's all out there, and the community. I mean, there's a lot of joking that happens around there, and if you be prepared to get stupid answers if you ask stupid questions, but if you ask a valid question, you're going to get some really
Yeah.
good advice
Yeah.
for free.
Man, I could keep talking to you for hours. I really could because I love talking about climbing mountains. I love talking
We should
about
go
the
climb one day.
ultimate, and yeah, I'd love talking about the ultimate endurance events, but I just love a guy who's been punched in the face by life a time or two and said, I will not give up. And that's happened to you in business. I'm sure there's people who are saying, man, I want to know a lot more about Stephen Pivnik. Where can they find out more about you, man?
Sure. So my website has a lot of information. I actually have an active blog that I keep about all of my adventures. So StephenPivnik.com. I assume that's going to be in the show notes.
We'll put the links to that in the notes. You got it.
So
Yep.
yeah, StephenPivnik.com has all my info, has my blog, and it has all my social media handles. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So those handles you can find off of my website.
I am gonna not only tell the audience to go there, but I'm gonna go there and check out some of your blogs myself, just to get a little bit of motivation when I need it, or just to get a little bit of advice from somebody who's been there before, man.
There's a
Thank
blog entry
you.
coming up next weekend. I'm doing the rim to rim to rim hike in the Grand Canyon.
Nice. Yeah. Rim to rim to rim in Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Nice. Man, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time. Thanks for being a guest on this show.
My pleasure,
with me,
Jeff. Thank you for having me so much.
I heard so many statements from Stephen that I wrote down and I'm going to put into practice. And honestly, if you haven't already written down the title to his book, I'm going to challenge you to go out and to get a copy of his book, Built to Finish. Because if half of these wise words that he made during this interview are in that book, it's worth the price. And as I mentioned during the interview, we're going to give away a copy of this book to somebody who's already a fan and already part of the Unbeatable Army. If you don't know what the Unbeatable Army is, it's a community of people that are very connected to one another. If you want to become part of the Unbeatable Army, all you've got to do is just go over to unbeatablearmy.com, and somebody who's already in the Unbeatable Army or who joins it through this episode is going to get a free digital copy of Stephen's book. We're out there on social media as well. And if you want to follow us, we're putting content out all week long. You can follow us just by searching for @Unbeatable Podcast on your favorite social media platforms. But maybe you stumbled across this interview and maybe this is the first time you've listened to this podcast. If you were as blown away by Stephen as I am, I want to challenge you to go out there and subscribe to this podcast and listen to other guests who have overcome some pretty incredible hardships. There's some amazing people that stay connected with us. They're with us week in and week out. And some of those people are very active on social media. And our fan of the week this week from social media is Matthew Dakota. Matthew, I want to say thank you for being part of the best podcast fans on the planet. Matthew, you're amazing. That's why we call you the fan of the week this week. Guys, thank you for staying with me for this episode. Thanks for listening. And I hope you heard something from Stephen today that you're going to carry with you the rest of the week. See you right back here next week with another incredible guest. God bless.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.